Welcome to Kenpo University. My name's Alan Babinick and I'm your instructor today. This video is about how to handle if you learn a technique a new way or if you totally change instructors and they expect you to do the techniques differently. So the first part I'm going to talk about, the first aspect of this, is just if you're an instructor, how to change over from one version of a technique to another version of a technique. The second half of this video is going to be about if you're a school owner or an instructor and you go totally to a new instructor. Okay? So the first part, if you learned a technique, so for example, when you're doing repeating mace, all right? When I learned repeating mace, we did it out of a fighting stance and you stepped off to the side. It looked almost exactly like reversing mace, okay? And it was hard to tell the difference. Then Mr. Planis said, well, that's not really the way it was originally done, so now we start from here and we pivot and hammer and then we step back and hit down. So that's a total change. So when I learned that, and then I have to go back to my studio and say, wait a second, we're doing this different now. I don't do it that way. So here's how you want to handle something like that. Because most of us don't want to say, oh, we've been doing it wrong, okay? Or just admit that we were wrong or something like that. So this is a smooth way to transition out. So if your students know that you went to a new instructor, you could just say, hey, I learned a cool variation off blank, whoever my new instructor is, all right? And so you could go to all your students and say, hey, you know how we learned this and it's always confusing? Yeah, hey, check this out. So if I'm standing here and some guy's doing a cross-hand push, bah, I can turn and do repeating mace right off of that. Then I could go into my hammer fist, right? So you got to be really excited about the whole thing, and you show it as a variation, all right? So you say, okay, let's do it like we normally do it. And the problem is, now I've been in business for 30 years. I'm in them for the long haul, okay? Usually if I want to totally change a technique or how we do something, it takes me 2 to 3 years to make a complete change. Because I'll keep doing it the way I was doing it. And when I learn a new technique, I have to go, wait a second, how does this fit into my view of the system? And how does this fit into my reality as far as Kenpo goes? So when I first learn it, I keep doing it the way I used to for quite a while, okay? But then I always start saying, hey, how about this variation? How about this variation? And then eventually, I just start teaching the variation. Now, the people that got past it, so this is orange, right? Or repeating mace was in orange. So as the people that were in orange get up towards the browns, and you just keep saying, hey, let's do the variation, let's do this variation. By the time they're up in brown, you got somebody starting again. Now you can teach them just the normal repeating mace way of standing like this and doing your outward hooking parry and your hammer fist. So you slowly turn the variation into the original technique. And then when the people that learned it the first time come all the way through and they're in brown, you could say, hey, you remember this variation? Yeah, let's do it that way, you know? And I could say like, Mr. Planis likes it that way, or Mr. Tatum likes it that way, whoever your instructor is, right? So you could say, hey, you know, my instructor likes it a little bit better that way, let's do it this way. But that's years till you get all the way around. As you review, I review all the time with my students, as you review in the future, you say, hey, remember this variation? Hey, remember their variation? So you do the normal technique, then the variation, and then eventually to those students you just go, okay, you guys remember the variation? Good, just do that. Just do that. That's all. And then all of a sudden, the variation becomes the normal way, and the way you used to do it becomes the variation. Okay, so you just kind of switch places with stuff, but it takes years to be able to do it. the second part of this. So if you change instructors. Now, I started off with one guy who was kind of reading the manual as he went. Okay, so what we learned wasn't all that great. And then I switched to another instructor, and then I switched to Mr. Planis. So I've had 3 instructor changes. So I've done this stuff. So what I'm telling you about, it's not guesswork, okay? Been here, done that, all right? So when you switch instructors, a lot of times your upper belts will go, oh, okay. You know, the new instructor wants us to do it a little bit different, and they'll be okay with it. I still do the gradual changeover, though, okay? And again, one of the main reasons why is when I learn something new, I have to go, how does this fit into my Kenpo brain? How does this fit into my view of the Kenpo technique world and the katas and everything else like that? So I have to process the technique and say, okay, maybe it doesn't fit in this family grouping anymore because something changed. Now it goes in this family group. Well, that changes everything, you know? But if you change instructors, a lot of times your upper belts will go, oh, yeah. And if your new instructor, I'm assuming you changed for a reason, if your new instructor is doing stuff with that makes a lot more sense to you or more towards how you like to do Kenpo, then it's going to be easy to be really excited about, hey, let's do it this way, all right? Here's an example. I thought I was doing the backbreaker like really well, okay? I thought I was a mean dude doing the backbreaker. And then I did it with Mr. Planis. And the backbreaker got meaner, believe it or not. Just the way he does it or the way he has us do it, it's just, wow, this is really going to hurt, okay? So it's really exciting for me to pick something up like that where you're just going, oh, wow, this is fantastic, right? This is great stuff. So when you're going through, when it's a really cool change like that, you always want to show everybody, hey, look what I learned, you know? And you could still say, if there's something that's added to it or taken away from it or whatever, you could still say it's a variation and switch it slowly over time, okay? But if it solved a whole bunch of problems, okay, like learning Dance of Death. If you always get kicked in the groin on Dance of Death, you're doing something wrong, right? So as soon as you learn, hey, this is how to fix the problem, once you start showing your students and it fixes all their problems, hey, everybody's happy, right? But when you have a technique where it just changes something because it changed something, all right? It's different, not that much different, but you're supposed to do it this other way. It's not kind of hard to get excited about that, all right? Or if you learn a technique that you like or that you're like, oh, blinding sacrifice, fantastic technique. I love that one. I love doing it. It's fantastic. And then you find out it's a category completion technique, and you probably bash yourself in the face when you do the double back knuckles. You go, oh. And now you have to, the technique you were all excited about, you have to try to explain to your students, so-so, you know, or you fix it. So, because blinding sacrifice isn't a bad technique, you just got to watch what you're doing in it, okay? Circling windmills, take that one, you know? So if you could take circling windmills, I think I did a video on it, on how to change it to make it work really well. That's awesome, because a lot of times people see circling windmills, and they do the hammer, slice, 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 peck, crane, hammer, slice, 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 peck, crane, and they're doing all that stuff, and it's like, why am I doing this? This won't work. So when you learn a way to take that technique and make it actually work, well, that's exciting and awesome, and all your students are going to want to do it that way. And then you just say, you know, you could keep teaching the original way. According to the manual, you could keep teaching the original way, but then eventually you go, just do the variation, just do the variation. And I call those working techniques, all right? So I'll say do a working version. So if you're doing, what did I just say, circling windmills, all right? I'll say, okay, here's the original way from the manual because of We need it for category completion throughout the system. All right, same with blinding sacrifice. We need it for category completion through the system. But there's a problem with it. So now show me a working version. And a lot of times what I'll do, especially for circling windmills up in Brown, because they're supposed to be study in motion, right? I'll just say, you come up with a working version. And I'll give them that as homework, because a lot of people just throw circling windmills out as a technique because it is what it is. But if you think about it, how many times is somebody going to come in with a push followed by a punch, right? That's huge. That's going to be all over the place. So the premise behind the technique is good. It's just the middle bit. We don't like the middle bit of the technique, right? So if you change instructors and all of a sudden you find this new cool way to do circling windmills, you definitely want to show everybody how to do it. Again, I'll still teach the ideal phase from the manual and say, okay, this is because we're learning this, here's the second side of the finger whips or whatever it is. And then I'll say, okay, here's your working variation, okay? Or your working version of a technique, because it works, unlike some of them. So, but that's what I can tell you about either switching techniques from one that you've been doing the same way for a very long time, or if you switched instructors, you have to go about it slow, keep doing what you're doing, and just say, here's a variation. Here, try this out, try this out. And if they're super psyched about the variation, just go full steam ahead with that one. All right? If it's a so-so kind of change, just turn the variation into the original and switch their places around over a period of time. Okay? And you could usually gauge it by one person going through your system around. All right? So I hope that helps. If you guys do have any questions out there, feel free, give me an email, al@kenpouniversity.com, and I'd be more than welcome to talk back to you. Okay? So give me a yell. I hope this helped. And to all those people out there on their own, I feel your pain. I feel your pain. So let's talk. Thank you for watching this video production from Kenpo University.